Week 9 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few kickers I have as sleepers this week. The first kicker, Cam Whittle of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's out there in 91% of fantasy leagues. We know he's got a big boot, kicking a 70-yard field goal in the preseason is Cam Whittle. And also he's on an offense that has their struggles at times, have to settle for field goals. And this week a good matchup indoors, which is obviously always a plus at the Raiders that give up the 14th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. So week 5 versus Kansas City 9, week 6 versus Seattle 0, week 7 versus the Rams 1, then the bye week last week. So like I said, the numbers haven't been great this season. He's a good long distance kicker. Is Cam Whittle, like I said, 70 yards he had in the preseason. 45, 50 yard range isn't a problem for Cam Whittle as well. So this week with a good matchup, had the bye week off to regroup a little bit is Cam Whittle. I like him as a sleeper option. Next kicker, Will Rashard of the Minnesota Vikings. So Rashard, he's pretty much on this list every week, and he's one of the better kickers, in my opinion, in the league. Out there right now in tons of leagues, and 83%. He got dropped in 6% from last week to this week. But Rashard, for the most part, he's going to get his opportunities. I know last week he missed a 53-yarder, but for the second time this season, it hit off the camera up there. That's how high and far he's kicking that football is Will Rashard. That 2 field goals he missed this season, hitting the camera. Week 4, Pittsburgh 8. Week 5 at Cleveland 3. Week 6 had the bye. Week 7 versus Philly, 18 fantasy points. And Week 8 at the Chargers, 6 fantasy points. So this week, another indoor game for Will Rashard. J.J. McCarthy in there, quarterback. I know it's a tough matchup at Detroit, and they give up the least amount of fantasy points to kickers on the season. But Minnesota, I think they're going to stall out a lot and play conservative a little bit as well with McCarthy in their quarterback, where I could see in this ball game a couple times they trot Rashard out there for some 50-plus yarders. So with an indoor game and Minnesota knowing they got to put a lot of points on the board, I like Rashard once again as a sleeper this week. And the final kicker, Andy Borregales of the New England Patriots. So Borregales out there in 95% of fantasy leagues, and he's putting up some fantasy points. 3 out of 4 weeks, 7 or more fantasy points, and 2 out of 4 weeks with double-digit fantasy points. Week 5 at Buffalo 13, Week 6 at the Saints 5, Week 7 at Tennessee 7, and Week 8 versus the Browns, he had a big game, 13 fantasy points. So this week, another good matchup on paper. The Atlanta Falcons are coming in, and we just saw the Miami Dolphins go into Atlanta in last week's game, go up and down the field and put up 34 points in that game. So the Falcons give up the 6th most fantasy points to kickers on the season. And this Patriot offense is good, but in the red zone at times they struggle, and that's where obviously Borregales comes into play, and he's shown he could kick the football well for this Patriot team. So that's a few kickers I have as sleepers for week 9 of the fantasy football season.